Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of The Dating Game with Troy Francis, with myself, Troy Francis, international dating coach for over a decade, helping men and women all over the planet to achieve better outcomes in their dating and romantic lives. Without further ado, what we're going to do today is going to be reacting to a video that Chris Williamson made with Piers Morgan the other day. This one I wanted to do because I find Chris Williamson quite an interesting guy. He's obviously been very, very successful over the past a couple of years, really. He's blown up, right? His Modern Wisdom podcast is now one of the biggest in the world. He was recently on Joe Rogan, etc., etc. He's also a fellow Brit, which makes me patriotically proud, although I think he's based in Texas now. And, you know, this is an interview with Piers Morgan, who, incidentally, by the way, has gone completely YouTube now. He's like completely... He's like completely YouTube now. He's like full on YouTube, like full time. So it's kind of interesting because if you want to take note of where things are going as far as media is concerned, clearly YouTube is the place where it's at. Sorry, I'm just double checking something now. Clearly, YouTube is absolutely where it's at because. If you've got a figure as big as Piers and he is now exclusively doing YouTube, that's a pretty good indicator that, mainstream media, regular TV is kind of like not really, the force that it once was. And now it's all about getting... If you've got a figure as big as Piers and he is now exclusively doing... Jesus, sorry about that. It just shows you where media is going and how media is going. It's kind of an interesting development. But anyway, so Piers had Chris Williamson on. He's also obviously had Pearl on many times. He had Destiny on the other day. I'm not going to react to that one yet. It's about the Israeli-Palestine Gaza conflict. And yeah, it's a little bit beyond the scope probably of this channel. But it's kind of interesting that... he's getting these kinds of figures on. This is Piers Morgan, and he is becoming part of this sort of space in the discourse, if you like. And good on him. He's doing probably a bit of a Tucker Carlson, and fair enough. So what I would like you to do, please, is put questions into the chat or any comments that you've got, etc., etc., etc. And we will try to get to them as we go through this. Now, as I say, this is kind of it's not the longest interview. I think it goes on for about 40 minutes or something like that. But they do cover quite a number of different topics, and it's quite interesting from that point of view. So without further ado, and we do get into some dating stuff as well, which obviously is the meat and drink of this channel, but there's some other things in there as well. They talk about alcohol, they talk about self-development, self-improvement, of which obviously Chris is a huge exponent, and Piers probably less so, but let's leave that to one side. And so let's get into it. Here we go.
Chris Williamson is a record holder. He's the first star of Love Island that I've actually been interested in speaking to.
Love Island was kind of like the Champions League final of being a professional party boy.
A former model and nightclub promoter, he's now something of a self-help superstar. Millions watch him for his life hacks and lessons on success. His podcast, Modern Wisdom, is one of the biggest in the world. But does he really have it all figured out? Why is your name associated so much with fapping?
Are you saying I'm pro-fapping or anti-fapping or just a pathological fapper?
I didn't even know what fapping was.
I'm a fapping connoisseur. What can I say?
I mean, that's not going to get clipped and taken out of context, is it?
Maybe you're doing it right now. We might have passed peak woke. Mass shootings, eating meat, hip-hop, smelling of Axe body spray, and saying hello or have a nice day. All terrible examples of toxic masculinity there. Consistency is the only route to success. The thing that you would tell yourself 10 years ago is still the same thing that you need to hear now.
Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson?
Oh, God.
So, Chris is an interesting guy because what he's managed to do really is build this hugely successful career pretty rapidly, and they'll go into it in a second how he did this, because he started off on a thing called Love Island, which is a UK-based reality TV show, and he took that, which lots of people go on. Some of them become minor celebrities for a bit. Usually then they disappear into obscurity, and they, maybe they go and do personal appearances at a few regional nightclubs, and that's kind of about it. What Chris Williamson has been able to do, on the other hand, is use that as a springboard in order to become really an international celebrity, certainly on the podcast scene. As I said, Modern Wisdom, his podcast, hugely successful. And the way that he's done it has been very clever, really, because all he's done is he's brought in a bunch of extremely intelligent, articulate people who know about a variety of different subject matters and interviewed them. So it's not that Chris Williamson, intelligent guy, no one's taking that away from him, but the truth of the matter is that much of the success of the show really is the people that he's brought in, which from a marketing perspective, right, genius. But, somebody's got to do it. He's done it. He's done it very, very well, okay? But it's kind of interesting how he came up, because as he says, this isn't really the normal route for somebody who would have come out of Love Island.
Chris, great to have you on Uncensored. Yeah, first of all, on the Love Island thing, I sort of vowed I'd never interview a Love Islander. You are the exception. You've broken free from the mental prison camp, which I put them all in.
Yeah, so as I said, so Love Island, for those people who aren't familiar, is basically it's a reality show where you get a bunch of good-looking, buff people, men and women, together on an island. It's usually like in Spain, somewhere like Mallorca or something like that. And it all gets filmed for a number of weeks. I think it's like 8 weeks or something like that. And people get thrown out depending on the various tasks that they have to do and things that happen. There are penalties, etc., etc. And may the biggest Chad win. Now, Chris was on it some years ago. I think he lasted a few weeks, and then he was, he left the process. But instead of just becoming a B-list celebrity like everybody else does, he actually used it as a springboard for self-reflection, which, again, really, really interesting.
So congratulations on that. When you were in Love Island, you there, I think you were out on the...
And there we go. There he is, getting massaged on Love Island. Amazing.
19th day or something. I think you had a kind of epiphany about your life, didn't you? Explain that.
Yeah, not many people go on reality TV to get catapulted toward a life of meaning and alignment, but I'm an army of one here. Yeah, so I guess I spent most of my 20s acquiring success in the way that modern society maybe tells a young man that he should, with acclaim and status and people knowing who you are and money and parties and all that sort of stuff. And then Love Island was kind of like the pinnacle of that. It's the Champions League final of being a professional party boy, right? And yeah, during that, you have nowhere to go. There's no phones, no TV, no friends, no family, no internet, no distractions, no books, no nothing. It's just you and this scenario. And I was around people like the person I was pretending to be, which...
So that's a really good line he's come up with there. He says it was like the Champions League of the party boy lifestyle. So the Champions League, obviously, if you're familiar with English football, is a division of English football. And he's sort of saying, you reach the pinnacle of whatever this lifestyle that he was emulating was. So decent-looking guy, brought up in the north of England. He'd worked as a club promoter. He was living a fairly sort of... probably very fun, but fairly kind of, you might say, shallow sort of existence, okay, where there wasn't a lot of meaning there beyond. He was probably, doing well with the ladies. He was probably having a good time. He was out partying, etc., but there wasn't anything more to it. And in a sense, Love Island in the UK, that's kind of almost the top tier of that. If you can get on Love Island, you become like a celebrity for a period of time. You're on TV, you get lots of girls sliding into your DMs if you're a dude. The opposite if you're a woman, and it's so he'd reached the pinnacle of that sort of lifestyle, which is the lifestyle to which many people now aspire.
Which was this big name on campus, party boy type thing, and I had a fateful dose of contrast as I lived for 24 hours for 19 days, plus a week in lockdown that I'd done before, plus all of the post press and stuff after that. and realized I don't think that I'm living in alignment. I don't think the things that I believe are making me happy are truly what I should be doing with my life. And yeah, from there went on a big journey of self-discovery, a lot of introspection and meditation and breath work and morning walks and journaling and all that stuff. And then 750 episodes of Modern Wisdom and a ton of conversations later, here we are.
Yeah, and not just here, but you just did Joe Rogan's podcast, which is the biggest in the world, and your own podcast.
So yeah, I mean, incredible, really. He went through this whole sort of journey of self-discovery that seemed to have piggybacked off the back of going on this incredibly shallow and sort of consumerist kind of show. I mean, once again, I mean, if you're not based in the UK, you might not know Love Island. There are similar shows to this in the United States of America. You know the kind of thing we're talking about. It's all very like surface level. It's all very like, you know, sort of. It's about being good looking. It's about aesthetically. It's about being a Chad, basically. And obviously, this guy, decent looking dude, very good looking. He kind of fitted that archetype, and I think in many ways that he gets a lot of criticism for that because people think, well, he's good looking, so you know, there's no further substance about him, and obviously that's not the case, as he went on to prove later in his career. But it's kind of funny in a way that I mean, it wasn't like going to the Himalayas and sitting on top of a mountain and meditating that brought him to this like spiritual journey, quasi-spiritual journey that he's describing. It was actually going on Love Island, which is quite funny.
I think is rocketing up the charts in America, which is, you know, pretty unusual actually for most people in this country to be a star in that medium in America. So it's really
we're slowly taking that country back over, one podcast episode at a time, and recolonizing it.
I love it. I'm with you. I'm in the trenches with you. But it's been an amazing journey for you. What have you learned about yourself? I mean, you distill all this wisdom to people. What have you actually learned about yourself?
One of the most interesting insights is that if you, one of the most common questions people ask is something like, what would you tell you 10 years ago? And that is, you know, I wish that I feared less. I wish I cared less about the opinions of others. I wish I did whatever. Almost always, without exception, the thing that you would tell yourself 10 years ago is still the same thing that you need to hear now. I think that we change in many ways, but fundamentally the pathologies and fears and things that hold us back seem to remain uncomfortably stable across time.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? And that's a new one on me, really. I never quite thought of it like that, but maybe he's right. The things that we would tell ourselves 10 years ago are probably the same things that we need to tell ourselves today. In a way, that undermines the idea of self-development, doesn't it? Because in a way, doesn't that say, well, then you know, most of us can't change, or we haven't changed, and so we still need to learn the same lessons. In saying that, I think in my own experience, in my own life, there is a tendency to repeat the same mistakes over and over again in a slightly different form. Okay, so it might be, you know, if you have an issue around relationships, it might be, you know, you're getting into problematic relationships. It's not with the same person, but it's with other people who are very similar. Okay, you know, you're getting yourself into those same situations once again, you know, and or it might be, you know, to do with how you handle money. It might be to do with what you do in your career. It might be to do with what you do in terms of your self-confidence. And I think, unfortunately, he's right. And I suppose one lesson here, if we're looking at this from a self-development perspective, I suppose one lesson here is it's a constant journey. Okay, it's a constant journey of self-improvement. It's not just this one and done. Oh, right, okay, now I've sorted my dating life, so I'm good to go. Now I've sorted my financial life, I'm good to go. Now I'm in shape, so I never need to go to the gym again, all right? We need to be working on these things constantly throughout our lives in order to maintain the gains that we've made, okay? Because otherwise, we're just going to keep doing the same stuff and going back to the same place. Please do put your questions into the chat, by the way, and we will get through it as we get on with this.
So other little bits and pieces, caring about what other people think of you is usually pretty pointless because most people don't even like themselves. Most people's criticisms of you are projections of what they don't like about themselves or what they don't like about the world. It's not about you. It's literally about them.
Yeah, so Modern Life Dating, good to see you, bro. He says, come to Manila, Troy, and make me a mod. Haha. Yes, I will make you a mod, probably a bit later. And Marriage Causes Divorce says he's right. You can't escape your psychology. Leopard doesn't change its spots. Well, I mean, that's the big $99 million question, isn't it? Can a leopard change its spots? I think it can. For the most part, I think that I believe that you can be born with a certain set of attributes. You can be born with a certain, manner of behaving in the world. And over time, you can change that. I really believe that. I mean, for example, if you look at something like just like socializing, for example, I was always incredibly introverted. I was very, very shy. I didn't particularly like the company of people anyway, so I wasn't really making much of an effort at all. And consequently, my social life, and even more so my dating life, absolutely sucked until I hit around the age of 20. And then what happened, and this is not self-improvement advice at all, because this is absolutely the opposite of what you should do. But basically, I went out there and I started partying, and I started to drink too much, and I started to take various different substances and have a great time. And what that kind of did was blew up whatever internal fortress I created around my mind. It just exploded it, so that I was able to break out of that shy, introverted, kind of nerdy person that I had been and become something else. Now, does that mean that the shy, introverted, nerdy persona does no longer exist? Well, it does, and I still do have a tendency towards introversion, but because I've now practiced being social, and I've practiced all this dating stuff and going and talking to women that I hadn't met before and putting myself in awkward social situations and even going on camera or doing things like this for so many years, naturally over time you do change. Now, that doesn't mean that your fundamental proclivities are wholly different. I don't believe that they ever are. I think probably we are wired in a certain way, but I do think that with persistence and over time you can change. Okay, but he's right, because unless you do something about it, then in 10 years' time, you are going to be in the same place. And I'm just talking about my, like, say, social skills now. Okay, that's one element of my life. But there are other elements of my life where, when I think about them, if I'm being honest, what I told myself 10 years ago, I probably should tell myself now the same thing. So it needs to be across the board. Anyway.
What else have I seen? Certainly that consistency is the only route to success. Consistency doesn't guarantee that you'll be successful, but if you're not consistent, you won't be.
That's interesting. So, sorry, I can't see the comments on the screen here for some reason, but Marriage Causes Divorce is saying he did a really good interview with the Trigonometry podcast. He said the black pill is more correct than the red pill. I need to watch that one. I haven't watched that yet. Yeah, drop me the link maybe if you want, or I'll find it on his channel. But, I think if we want to talk black pill versus red pill, if we're defining black pill as it's all about looks, personally, I think, and the older I get, I believe this more and more, I think it's a little bit naive to think that it's just about looks. I think other things play into it more. I think if you want to be doomer about it and you want to say, well, it's not about game, it's about something else, I would say that money and status, in the end, for a guy, probably play more of a part than looks. But then it depends what you're going for, because we know that women's short-term mating selections are different to their longer-term mating selections. In other words, she'll probably fuck the good-looking dude with the 12-pack at the beach party because he's hot or whatever, but she wouldn't necessarily marry that guy. She's going to marry the guy with the resources. Ideally, she wants both together, okay? And that's the sweet spot, but very few guys achieve all of the stuff that hypergamy requires within the same person. So I just feel like... I don't know, man. From everything I've seen and everything I've observed, I think that the black pill... I mean, yeah, of course, looks are important. Yeah, of course. If Chris Williamson walks into a bar, good-looking guy, he's going to get attention. He's also a celebrity now, or a celebrity of sorts. So that's going to help. But even if he wasn't, he would get attention. Yes, he's in good shape. Yes. But is that the only thing? No, I really don't think it is. I think if you want I think the real black pill is actually that money and status are much more involved with this than we would care to admit.
So those are at least some to break down.
It's interesting because I've interviewed
1,000 hours.
Yeah, I've interviewed Andrew Tate a number of times, and he has a huge following. There's no doubt about it. I get so many young men, teenage boys and so on coming up to me. What's Andrew Tate like? What do you think of him? They ask me. And it's a complicated question because A lot of what Tate says, I kind of find myself nodding. I've got 3 sons in their 20s, one's 30 now. I've been through their upbringing. And there's no doubt a lot of young men these days feel a bit lost and they're crying out for people to try.
All right, so Eric says the truth is somewhere between the red pill and the black pill. Well, the problem that I have with the black pill, and John, I believe, if he's still on here, would probably echo this, is that the black pill fundamentally says there's nothing you can do. Because if you're not born incredibly good looking, then it's over. So you may as well just give up. And they therefore reject anybody who offers any kind of self-development advice. And they would reject anything that I say, but they would also reject anything that Chris Williamson says, because they would look at Chris Williamson and say, well, you're a good looking dude. It's easy for you to say you're just going to attract women naturally anyway. Whereas, you know, I am whatever, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of these so-called, you know, black pill people, they don't actually show their photos, so it's very hard to determine how physically unattractive or not they are in reality, but they claim that their looks are of a status which is so low that no woman's going to look at them, okay? And so therefore, anything, even like going to the gym, doesn't make any difference. You're just an ugly dude with a good body. Making money, well, she's just going to use you for your money and discard you. Gaining status, again, she might mess with you for a while, but she's gonna fuck the pool boy. So it's a very, very bleak message, and that's a message that I can't endorse, because for one thing, I think it's incredibly bad life advice in general, right? Because, you know, we're all here. It's what, a 1 in 400 trillion chance that I'm here, that you're here, that Chris is here, that Piers Morgan is here, right? So while we're here, we might as well try and max things out as best as we can. So there's that side of things. And secondly, fundamentally, I do think that these other things do come into play. I don't believe that male attractiveness is solely predicated on how you look. I do think, because we have clients, okay, who are very good looking, and they're not getting any action, right? It's crickets, okay? So if it was just about looks, those guys would be getting laid like rock stars, but they're not. So there's clearly something more to it. And this is what we try to teach in our course, The Edge, the course that I'm doing with James Tusk. If you want more information on that, you can email me, troy@realtroyfrancis.com. But basically, there has to be this X factor. There has to be something else. And the same thing, by the way, is true of money as well. Because although I said money and status plays into it, and they do, there are also plenty of dorky, boring, rich guys out there as well who are not getting any action. Or if they are getting action, they're not retaining those women because the women in the end think this guy's a bit of a boring fucker, and then it all falls apart, okay? So you kind of need to have everything, but I think it's overly simplistic and frankly a little bit naive just to put it down to one individual thing. I mean, look at Piers Morgan's wife. If they're still married, I believe they're still together, is a very good looking woman, right? Would you say Piers Morgan is the best looking bloke on the planet? No. Now, he's got other attributes though, you know. He has status, he is articulate, he's probably got, you know, decent money, whatever, right? So I think male attractiveness is much more holistic than we assume. Okay, and we're lucky in that regard. We're very lucky in that regard, because the unfortunate thing for women is, sadly for them, it kind of is really all based around looks and body shape for the most part. Okay, not saying other things don't come into play at all, because they do, but for the most part, you know, men do tend to be very visual. With women, they are taking these other things into account, which is kind of good, because it does mean you can level up. And the problem with the black pill is that their message is the antithesis of that. They're like, no, you can't level up, just give up, just go and sit in your bedroom.
Try and guide them, and in his, you know, pretty blunt way, Tate does that to a degree, but he also does other stuff which I'd imagine, like me, you would find very uncomfortable.
Leading question. Eric says, if you do all your dating relationships off I think Tinder and Instagram, the black pill is most relevant. Well, that's true. And actually, we're going off on a bit of a tangent with this black pill stuff here, but we might as well, because I wanted to use this video more as a way to start the discussion rather than, you know, just the thing in itself. Yes, and what you will notice is that a lot of the data that these people will bring to bear on their arguments is from the dating apps. So they will say, well, look at what happens on the dating apps. Look at how women select on the dating apps. Look at how many men they reject. Look at how many men they swipe past. They'll only swipe on the top 5% of men, and all of that. Now, all of that may well be true. However, what you notice if you go and meet people in real life is there is a marked difference to how you are perceived when you approach a woman in real life than to how you might be perceived by her on the dating app. So, for example, my girl, I was talking to her last week and she was saying, look, I mean, she said, on paper, you are not my type, okay? On paper, you are not my type. There are other things that I, prefer, okay? Had I met her or attempted to meet her via a dating app, it's very likely she wouldn't have swiped on me. It's very likely we wouldn't have matched. Now, instead, because we met in real life, she was able to sort of see some of my personality, a bit of the riz, a bit of the, the cheeky chappy London geezer, whatever it was she liked about me. That changed the dynamic. And then she found out that there were even more things about me she didn't like my job and all kinds of crap, okay? But because of the chemistry between us, because of the way we were able to build the relationship, those things were kind of, I'm not saying she ignored them, but those things became less onerous to her because she also recognized that I had these other qualities that she did find very attractive. So again, it's kind of like male attractiveness is this spectrum of different things, and women will compromise on certain elements in favor of other elements, okay? Now, you could say, okay, yeah, but she's going to cheat on you inevitably anyway, one day, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe not. You've got to find a good woman. But the reality is, nevertheless, it's not all just predicated on this one individual factor.
What do you feel about him generally?
He's a complex character. I had him on the podcast about 3.5 years ago, and I didn't actually release the episode. So I have 2 hours of unreleased Andrew Tate footage. We were in the midst of COVID. It was mostly a conversation about COVID and lockdowns and crackdowns and stuff like that. And it was that time when my channel would have just been nuked for the sake of trying to get one conversation out. So at the time, I didn't do it. And then a lot of people have said, why didn't you release it when he was at the peak of his fame? Obviously, that could have got an awful lot of plays. And to be honest, I didn't do it because I thought it would be a pretty poor move on Andrew, although not like I have some obligation to do whatever. But if someone makes a ton of comments during a rapidly moving, chaotic situation, and also they're a bit gregarious, 3 years later, releasing that out into the world kind of stitches him up a bit, and I didn't want to do that. So yeah, we've got 2 hours of unreleased Andrew Tate footage. But he's a complicated guy.
That seems pretty decent, doesn't it? That seems like I mean, if he's genuine, he sounds genuine saying that. That seems to imply that he's a pretty good guy, right? I mean, he could have just released that footage. He could have sent that stuff out. Incidentally, I've got an Andrew Tate interview from around the same time at the beginning of the lockdowns. I don't know if it's still up on my channel or not. My other channel, I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, I quite like the way Chris said that. That was, I think, a principled answer.
Is he a force for good? Is he a force for good with young men or not?
Mixed bag. Net, I don't know. He's certainly brought an awful lot of attention to the plight of young men, and he's tried to simplify down a world which teaches young men that they are defective women. Most of the advice that we hear for young men at the moment is, if you were just less like men, if you just behaved a little bit more like women, if you talked about your feelings a little bit more, if you communicate, if you were more gentle, if you were less concerned with mastery and competition and conquer and becoming better and stuff like that, some of the typical masculine traits, your life would be better. Many men feel like their issues are being dismissed as whining from a patriarchy that they no longer feel a part of.
Yeah, I mean, the Barbie move.
So that's interesting, because yes, this idea of patriarchy gets talked about a lot, right? The patriarchy, the plight of modern women, how the patriarchy still exists, the gender pay gap divide, the way that women are discriminated against in the workplace, the way that women are perhaps treated in the dating sphere or in social spaces. Okay, all this stuff gets talked about a lot. But there are many men out there who feel powerless, right? They don't feel like they are part of this extremely powerful, homogenous group, the patriarchy, who are these guys who are just in control. In fact, many men feel absolutely the opposite. They feel powerless, all right? And we've seen the statistics about how, for example, male virginity has tripled in the last couple of decades or whatever it is, okay? Many men are just giving up on dating altogether. They don't feel any sense of power as far as women are concerned. In fact, if anything, they feel it's the other way around. They feel the power is on the women's side. And that's also the case increasingly in the workplace, where often women will run the HR department and will have decisions over like the hiring and the firing and so on and so forth. Obviously, we have positive discrimination and so on and so forth. So it's a strange dichotomy whereby on the one hand, men are being accused of this toxicity and being accused of, well, you guys are in this predominant situation and therefore, you know, you're bad and it's toxic and everything. But actually, increasingly, guys are feeling like they have very diminishing power in society. And I think that's a very telling point that he makes here.
The blockbuster of the year mentioned patriarchy, I think, a dozen times.
Barbie was a terrible film. I don't know, man. I went to see Barbie with a female friend towards the end of the summer, after all the hype had sort of died down. And I only really went to see it because people were talking about it in the space. I've been on Access Vegas, and the first thing Mike Sartain says, right, we're going to talk about Barbie. And I'm like, oh, shit, I haven't even seen the damn thing. So, you know, I was like, well, what am I going to say for the first 20 minutes of this podcast? It was obviously something that got talked about a lot. I felt like I should see it. I watched it. I don't know, man. For me, it was very meh, you know? I thought there were some funny bits. I just wasn't really feeling it. I mean, obviously it wasn't entirely aimed at me. I thought they sort of muddied the waters a little bit as well, because on the one hand, you could say, well, it was this very sort of feminist film that highlighted the plight of women because women are expected to conform to these stereotypes and et cetera, and that's the whole Barbie thing. But then on the other hand, they were sort of covering their bases by saying the same thing about Ken and saying, yeah, but men are also forced to conform to these masculine standards as well, and is that a problem? So I came out of it thinking, well, so basically you're saying both genders have it rough. So life's tough, right? So where does that really get us? I didn't kind of see the overall point of it, if that makes sense.
About the third, I'd had enough of it. You know, I don't even know.
Well, that's a company obviously that has a ton, way more than on average female execs at the top, which I'm sure you know about.
Yeah.
A leader.
All right, so JBB, who's a supporter of the channel, so thanks for tuning in. He says, this fool is straight up lying. I assume you mean Chris. I assume you don't mean me. Maybe you do mean me. If so, thank you very much. But when you say that, what do you mean? Why? And you're putting about the way his eyes are looking and stuff like that. But what do you think he's lying about specifically? I mean, I know people have differing opinions on Chris. Some people feel that he, I don't know how to put it, panders maybe a little bit. So let me know if you guys have got any further thoughts on this or your opinions on Chris. Let me know in the chat. I'll be interested to hear them.
The director, the production crew, all of this stuff. I didn't see much patriarchy sitting behind the scenes of that movie.
Well, it never works. It never works.
So the thing with the patriarchy as well, I had this conversation with Pixie. You know, you guys will know Pixie. You know, she's a feminist. She's a progressive girl. She often appears on these podcasts. She's on Fresh and Fit and whatever, and Valuetainment and all this stuff. And I know I'm friends with her from Miami, and her friend Erin as well, Straighter Aid. And you know, I've asked her a couple of times and said, well, you know, what is it now? Like, what is this manifestation of the patriarchy that we still need to, or you guys still need to, you know, overcome? You need to fight. Like, what is left that needs to be eradicated as far as you guys are concerned? And I don't want to misquote her here, or maybe we'll get her on at some point and we can have the conversation directly. But I've never heard her really give. I mean, there are certain things they'll talk about the gender pay gap. Again, but I mean, that seems to have been debunked somewhat. I mean, if you watch the Jordan Peterson interview, she'll talk about it's these very nuanced sort of small things. But I mean, it seems to me, and look, I'm not living in a vacuum here. Obviously, I have female friends, I have a girlfriend, I have female members of the family and everything like that. And living in the West, living in London, in the UK, spending time in America, I just don't see. Again, this is like, you know, what male privilege or whatever, but I don't see this hugely oppressive system operating that's really denigrating and pushing women down. Do you know what I mean? Like, if anything, it seems to be kind of the opposite, and they get more into this as we go on.
It's the other way. You know, if you have an all-female cast, a female director, female studio boss, and it's based on a story that promotes women at the expense of men, that's fine. The only narrative that needs to be dealt with is if women are not at least equal in every regard, or are not portrayed as glowing heroines, and then all hell breaks loose.
The problem that you have is most portrayals of women in modern cinema show them as flawless. They don't need to overcome anything at all in order to be successful. They're born perfectly natural. Perfect example of this from The Critical Drinker, the 2 Mulan movies. You'll remember the first one, the animated one, and then they did a live action. In the first one, the protagonist is smaller and weaker and needs to use her cunning and her nous and work incredibly hard to be as good as the guys that are around her. It's a inspiring story of someone who doesn't have everything immediately, working sufficiently cleverly and sufficiently hard and consistently to overcome their challenges. Roll that forward to the live action version of it. She was bestowed with being the best in the world. She didn't need to do anything. And the only challenge that she needed to overcome were the men around her not believing in her sufficiently. It's patronizing. It's patronizing to women. If I was a woman and I was basically being fed, you are perfect as you are. You don't ever need to overcome anything, and any challenges that you face are exclusively because of the world out there being oppressive onto you. That's not inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with that, really. And I think there's an important point here about self-improvement. I mean, the men's self-improvement space is very big, as we know, all right? I mean, you've got from people, like me doing this stuff, to you've got the guys in the manosphere, you've got Fresh and Fit, and then you've got Chris Williamson, and then you've got Joe Rogan, right up to the stratosphere of this stuff. There's a lot of people out there. I mean, Wes Watson is another dude I've been listening to recently. You've got Jocko Willink. There's a lot of guys. I mean, you arguably Tate, people have their issues with him, but I mean, it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? It's like get up, go to the gym, lift weights, get to work, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. Like men are very, very, very much encouraged now in the culture to get out there and grind and do it. And rightly so, because as we always say, the burden of performance is on men, okay? So men in a way don't really have a choice because you do. You can not do any of that stuff and you can sit in your bedroom and do fuck all. But the reality is you're going to get left behind in the dating marketplace, at least, and probably in the career marketplace and business and everything else if you don't attend to these things. Like there's an expectation on men to self-improve. It doesn't seem that, and I don't consume a lot of media that's aimed at women, so this isn't definitive, but from what I've seen, it doesn't seem like there's the same amount of content that is pushed towards women, telling them to self-improve. And I just think from a human perspective, that's not a good thing, all right? Because I think that we should all be on a journey, whether you're a man, you're a woman, whatever, we should all be on a journey of self-improvement because none of us is born perfect. Now, the problem, of course, you've got is that if a woman she's born, she gets to the age of 18, 19, 20, she's very good looking, she's naturally, in good shape, etc. She doesn't really need to do a lot. Certainly not for the first few years, for the first 10, until maybe she hits 30 or whatever. She doesn't need to do a lot because genetically she's just in great shape anyway. And as we would always say, what that means is she's afforded these amazing opportunities that the average guy, and even beyond the average guy, even the Chad, for the most part, is not going to be afforded. Okay, like she's going to get taken to the Oscar party. She's going to be on the yacht. She's going to be on this. She's going to be on that. She's going to be invited by A-list celebrities to these different things. Okay, the average dude is just not going to get those opportunities. Okay, unless he's selling drugs, maybe, I don't know. But for the most part, the average dude and even the above average dude is not going to get that level of access. So women, not all women, but women who are blessed in those departments tend to get a lot handed to them on a silver platter very early on. And so the necessity for self-improvement for women is lower. And on top of that, because men are expected to step up to the plate and be the providers and be the guys who go in there and sort it out and look after her and everything else, there's even less of an onus on self-development for women, which I think is just a bad thing for women. Because, as I say, I think all of us, while we're here, we should be aiming to become the best version of ourselves that we can. Now, that's not to say that no women do anything. Obviously, they do. There's a lot of women who are very into their fitness, into their health, into their gym, into their wellness, holistic, meditation. women who are content creators. I mean, there are women who do amazing things, but I just don't feel that it is sort of pushed on them in the culture as much as it is on men. And I just can't see that being a good thing.
How does that inspire a new generation of girls?
Totally agree. In the same way, I believe that the problem for a lot of young men is this toxic masculinity weaponized badge of dishonor.
Okay, so Don DeMarco says, okay, well, no, actually, SJ says, I find Chad Williamson panders hard like Mike Sartain on Access. It's so cringe. I thought Rollo was jelly like Pearl, but Chad panders and fence sits. No actionable pieces from Chad. Okay. JBB, his lingo sounds like it's right out of a certain book or podcast I've listened to quite regularly. Cough. Okay. I guess you're talking about Mr. Tomasi there. I could be wrong. The issue with Chris is he stops short when he senses the truth will hit women too hard. His self-admission, he dodges convos with Rollo and the other RP guys. Okay. He has good chats and isn't from an overall bad place, but still. Okay, yeah. He says, JBB, he's still a little soft when delivering the truth. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to like massively disagree with that. You're probably right. I think it becomes hard. And I'm not excusing it, but I think it becomes hard for content creators, particularly as they grow in stature and popularity, to sort of deliver the harder truths, if you like, particularly in the current climate. So I think you're probably right about some of this stuff. What can you say? I still think, as one of you guys has said there, I think he's coming from a good place, and I think at least he's opening up the conversation, which is probably, I would argue, better than nothing.
Where almost everything that's a masculine trait has been redefined as toxic. You know, even down to when men now hold a door open for women. A lot of women almost spit in their faces. How dare you do that? You know, how dare you be chivalrous? The old sort of hunter-provider idea of a male role model, absolutely condemned out of hand. You know, strong men are now traduced as somehow a problem. Weak men or very emotional men or very vulnerable men, they're all heroic and so on.
Well, they are, but are they getting laid? You know, and that's I suppose the nuance that Piers isn't going to go into here because it's kind of off topic and it's not his thing anyway. But I mean, yes, men who are emotional, men who are in touch with their vulnerable side, men who are in touch with their feelings and all of that jazz. He says they're being viewed as heroic. Well, possibly, but are women really wanting to get down and dirty with them? And the answer is probably no, okay, for the most part. So, I mean, it was interesting because on that Fresh and Fit podcast we did the other day, one of the women was arguing, well, what's going to happen in society is you're going to get women who are taking on more of a dominant masculine role because they're earning more money and they're in a more powerful position in society. And so men are going to become more feminized, and that's just going to be how it goes, okay? And so then, more feminized men are going to get together with more masculine women. Personally, I can't see that happening because I don't think that you can, take apart the wiring of hundreds of thousands of years of human development overnight. I just can't see that being the case. I think most women still like a guy who is more dominant, all right, in whatever way that is, whether that, in the various ways that the various definitions of that term. Okay. So I think that what we're going to see actually is an increasing rich versus poor gap in terms of the dating marketplace, because as more and more guys become softer and they become more vulnerable, more emotional, less in touch with the kind of masculinity that these dudes are talking about here, simply they're going to get friend zoned more, right? So women are going to, they might like them and think that they're laudable and like them as friends, but they're not going to be attracted to them, okay? And the few guys at the top who sort of hang on to that more masculine streak, that more dominant streak, those are the guys who are going to be rewarded, okay? And society is pushing this because the message in society is, no, you can't be this toxic man, you can't be this bad, guy like one of these internet people. You've got to be like super in touch with your feelings. You've got to be like super woke and all the rest of it. And okay, that's fine and that's all very well. But again, how's that going to fare for you in the dating marketplace? And the truth is that women aren't viscerally aroused by guys who exhibit those qualities, or at least not for the most part.
And it's this constant narrative along those lines, which I think really unsettles and confuses young men. They're like, well, what am I supposed to be? Because most women they probably meet don't agree with the caricature of the men they're supposed to be told they should be liking.
Can I give you a list of headlines I found that have...
Exactly. I think what he was saying then is what I was trying to articulate. Let's just listen to that again.
And so on. And it's this constant narrative along those lines, which I think really unsettles and confuses young men. They're like, well, what am I supposed to be? Because most women they probably meet don't agree with the caricature of the men they're supposed to be told they should be liking.
So, yeah, I think what he's saying there is what I was trying to say before, which is that actually most women aren't actually attracted to these kinds of more emotional men that society is now telling them that they should be attracted to. And so that's creating a problem in the dating market.
Can I give you a list of headlines I found that have different things that are supposedly toxic masculinity?
Yeah.
Mass shootings, toxic masculinity, gang violence, climate change, the financial
climate change
crisis, Brexit is toxic masculinity, the election of Donald Trump, not wearing a mask, eating meat, physical fitness, fast food, capitalism.
Physical fitness
is toxic masculinity, and communism is toxic masculinity. Hip hop, smelling of Axe body spray, being stoic, risk taking, religion, but also secularism and atheism, playing board games, being interested.
Playing board games. How is playing board games toxic masculinity? Jesus Christ.
In cars and saying hello or have a nice day. All terrible examples of toxic masculinity there.
And you know, the reality is, like, when you saw what Gillette did with so Gillette always had these big masculine commercials all about being a big, hunter provider kind of man. But then this huge U-turn after the Me Too campaign, and suddenly it was prove you're not Harvey Weinstein or you can't have a Gillette product. And they absolutely tanked their sales in the same way that Budweiser did when they used Dylan Mulvaney, who suddenly decided in the mid-20s that this biological woman, man would be identifying as a woman and make tens of millions of dollars by almost mocking biological females. And you see it time and again where they so grotesquely misjudge their audience.
And look at now, they've just brought Shane Gillis on board, a comedian who was so spicy that SNL had to get rid of him. And in the same week, SNL bring him back as well. I think we might have passed peak woke.
Okay, so that's interesting, and I think he might be right. I just want to address, so Marriage Causes Divorce, who says, women do want a man with a masculine and dominant presence, but they also want the same guy to be emotionally vulnerable and emotionally intimate. And I think that that's true. Now, that may then sound like, oh, God, well, that's so complicated. What do I do? It can't be this, it can't be that, blah, blah, blah. I think, and we try to teach this in The Edge and in, other videos that I've made and so on. You need to find that balance. You need to strike the balance. It's not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily intuitive. Well, it kind of is easy, really. You've got to be just a decent guy, but you've got boundaries. You've got that hard edge. Okay, there's some steel in your eyes. There's some passion in your eyes. Okay, she knows you're a serious guy, not to be fucked with, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that you're an automaton who's just emotionless and overly domineering and all the rest of it. Okay, it is doable. It sounds like a tall order, and yes, it's unfortunate for guys because women have these sort of somewhat contradictory demands. But I don't think it's as difficult as people think it is. I think it's just something that you need to understand intellectually and then start practicing in your relationships. Have we passed peak wokeness? I think possibly, because I think, well, from what I've seen anyway, is that you'll kind of get people who get cancelled and then they just pop up again somewhere else and they are able to, continue to create content and have a voice. I mean, Piers himself got kind of thrown off of, was it Good Morning Britain, after making comments about Meghan Markle? I think that was what happened. He wasn't exactly cancelled, but he was taken off a big mainstream TV show. Now he's back. He's got the YouTube thing. He's obviously doing really well. So if you look at the Tate, they went to Rumble. They're obviously doing well over there. You've got Fresh and Fit, who got demonetized, and now they're doing a bit of YouTube, and they're also doing Rumble, and they're doing well. I think it's becoming harder to fully cancel somebody now, because and I think that will increase as we go on, particularly with something like X. You got Twitter, you got X, right, which is becoming this sort of bastion of free speech, and Elon it appears to be fairly sort of laissez-faire about the people who are on there. So I think as we go forward, cancellation in its old form is going to be harder. Okay, I think people are going to pop up elsewhere, and moreover, there's going to be more of an appetite for views that are somewhat countercultural. Okay, because let's face it, if you're starved of dialogue and information and conversation that goes against the sort of the mainstream narrative, then people are going to have a hunger for that, right? And they're going to search it out. And I think that savvy platforms who recognize this are going to do very well out of it.
Yeah, I feel like we have.
I feel that.
I
actually.
think that. Yeah, I think that's the undercurrent.
The silent majority, which is a massive number of people, the silent.
Mart says 2K subs. Nice. Yes, thank you very much. We have made it to 2,000, which is, in the big scheme of things, compared to these guys, is absolutely chicken feed. But, listen, the channel's only been up for a couple of months. I've been putting out regular content. So to get to 2K is gratifying, and thanks everybody for the support. We are monetized, and we are going to be changing things up a bit from March. I'm going to be doing more sort of static 2-camera type videos where we're going to be delving deep into individual topics and giving you some real actionable advice about what's going out there in terms of dating and the best ways forward. Okay, so look out for that. We're still going to be doing some lives. I think we may be changing up the times a little bit, but just keep an eye out. All will be revealed very soon.
The majority just has got sick of it. They've got sick of everything they enjoy in life being redefined as somehow evil and corrupting and worthy of cancellation. They find the idea of the cancel culture completely ridiculous, but they also specifically like everything in their daily life that they enjoy, from comedy shows to movies to music to statues to heroes, whatever it is. The woke brigade's only response to all of it is it's all evil, it must all be cancelled, and we must go to a form of extreme puritanism where if you even crack a joke at work, you must be expunged from human life.
Indeed. So what have we got here? Marriage causes divorces. Congrats on 2K subs. Thank you. JBB says he plays ball games with his girl on the regular. I used to do that as well. We used to play Scrabble. It was great. He says, to show dominance, I just flip the board once in a while. Instant panty dropper. Mart says, from experience, women don't seem attracted by vulnerable and emotionally intimate men. Well, I mean, as with all of these things, it's the devil is in the detail. So yes, if you're like bursting into tears on every date and talking about your traumatic childhood and all this kind of thing, there's obviously a limit to what she's going to accept. Having said that, if she's into you and you guys are, you're into some kind of relationship, there's some, this isn't just like a super kind of like sexual casual thing, right? You're growing into something. She's going to want a bit of intimacy from you as well. She's going to want to know you're there for her. So it's as with all of these things, unfortunately, guys, it's a very fine balance. And this is why they say that relationship game is actually regular game on steroids, because it's one thing when you're sort of going from girl to girl to girl to girl, and you're not really settling down, and you don't have to sort of step up to the plate in the same way. When you're with the same woman and you're with her for a period of time, then you're going to need to provide bits of each of these things, and the balance is, as I say, not always easy, but it is doable. It is doable.
If it hasn't passed their humor test, which is obviously the worst outside of North Korea in the world.
Okay, it's over 9K says, we need Elon Musk to buy YouTube so that we can have a free speech platform on here too. Well, I mean, look, the thing is, like, YouTube remains the biggest video platform, as you guys know, the biggest video platform in the world, and also the second biggest search engine in the world. Okay, so that's why everybody uses it, because people will say, well, why not just go onto Rumble? People say, Pearl, why not just go to Rumble? Well, the problem is in attracting new people because the user base of YouTube is so significantly bigger than something like Rumble. Okay, is that going to change anytime soon? Probably not. I would like to think that it will change in time, because I think that, you know, at the moment YouTube and Google indeed has something of a monopoly on this stuff, and you know, it's always good to bring competition into the marketplace. But one thing that somebody sent me a video recently, okay, and I, you know, putting aside Elon buying YouTube, which is probably not going to happen, but putting that to one side, this video was saying that what seems to be happening is because X is becoming more libertarian now in terms of the kind of content that it allows and the kind of content it promotes, the other platforms are now being a little bit more lenient themselves. Okay, so now you've got YouTube. So this guy did an experiment, and he posted a video on YouTube, and it had been kind of shadow banned when he first posted it. He then reposted it, I think a couple of subtle changes, reposted it, and suddenly it got pushed down. It got a load of views, and similar on Instagram as well. So what seems to be happening is that although those platforms remain in the same ownership, they're probably going to react to the market a little bit, because they're looking around and they're saying, well, hang on a minute, X is doing this. X is allowing people to say this or to talk about this, and we're not, and that could cause us difficulties, right? You know, we're going to lose market share here. So I think it is going to have an effect. I think, you know, for me, the more exciting thing would be to see what happens with X and whether X becomes a better video platform. Because at the moment, I mean, I put videos up on X, right? You know, I haven't done it for a couple of weeks, but often, you know, we'll do a YouTube video, I'll get some clips, stick them up on X, whatever. The problem with it is it's kind of here today, gone tomorrow. You know, it's in the feed. People might see it, they might not, whatever. And then it just goes because it's in the feed. Now, I do also put them in my highlights. So if you go to, and I think there's a media section as well. So if you went to my highlights, you'd see a bunch of videos there. But it's not as good. It's not like YouTube where you can go on there and you can search the videos and you get a playlist and all that kind of thing. So it doesn't, at the moment, work as a video platform in as good a way, in my opinion. Okay. But that's not to say that it couldn't. And it's not to say that they won't change it to do that, particularly as obviously video is becoming much more the predominant form, really, in terms of the way people communicate.
Yeah, I think this tyranny of the minority has gotten very old, and it was enforced through fear. It was enforced because if you make a joke or say a thing which is outside of this purity spiral Overton window of appropriateness, that is used as an indicator.
So Elon Musk did a tweet the other day, and I think it was in response to the video I was just talking about, and he said something like X slowly widening the Overton window, which I think it probably is. And look, I think that's a good thing. I mean, I'm not saying there should be super extreme, like massively offensive content everywhere. But at the same time, when we can't have conversations about very fundamental things in society, of course that is a problem. Snoop Dogg Fan Club says, "Hey Troy, I've become a big fan of yours. At first I wasn't, but now I am. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that." SJ says, "I think you're one of the guys with the most actionable advice and still going out, still on the ground. Chad Williamson is removed and dare I say clueless. Then again, most men are, to be honest." Well, yeah. I mean, look, he's not a dating coach, is he? I mean, he talks about the dating market. He's not actually a dating coach. I've had some contact with him, actually. I'm sure he, you know, myself and Tusk were in contact with him a little while ago. We were talking about potentially doing something. I mean, obviously now he's gone stratospheric, so the likelihood of that, I'm not certain of. But he seems like a decent guy. I think his heart's in the right place. You know, we could be overly critical. You could say, well, he's not really going for the jugular, or he's pandering and stuff like that. But, I mean, I don't quite know how I feel about that, because I think that he's got a big platform and he's able to talk to a lot of people and he's able to open these questions up for a lot of people. Now, some of you guys might be saying, yes, but why isn't he as hardcore as Rollo Tomasi, or why isn't he, you know, as hardcore as some other content creator you like? And you have to think, well, okay, but then what if he loses the platform? Is that a net benefit, or is that going to be a net loss? I don't know. I think that overall, I think that he is somebody who's doing some good work.
It's a smoking gun. Oh, see, that one thing that Piers said, that's...
Marriage causes divorce. Troy's the manosphere's best kept secret. Thank you very much. Yes. It's kind of... I don't know, man. It's kind of good that way in a way. I mean, I don't know. It's like, you know, obviously we all have this narcissistic side. We all want to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and all the rest of it. And I'm no stranger to that whatsoever. But at the same time, I think having a level of sort of not anonymity exactly, but, you know, being able to keep it on a certain level, I think has been quite good. Okay, because you get to the level of like Chris, and I think he talks about it in a minute, or some of these like bigger creators, and that brings its own problems. I mean, believe me, I've had my own problems anyway. Even being at this stage, I've had problems with, you know, people doing dodgy stuff and trolls and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, when you get to that level, or your Pearl or somebody like that, I mean, Jesus Christ.
Slip up, or that misspeak, or that general speak that was a little bit clumsy.
Or a genuine joke, which I just thought was a bit inappropriate, but still funny.
Exactly.
Right? We used to laugh at them.
He's secretly the racist, homophobic, xenophobic, anti-Semite, whatever, that we always knew that he was. And I think that people should turn their eye much more on the ones that throw accusations than the people that are being accused. Because I think it's a defense mechanism. I think that any time that someone is overly purity, nicey, like that evil headmistress from Harry Potter, it's an indicator that, oh, hang on, what about you?
Yeah.
What's going on behind the scenes with you? And we see that.
Well, he's probably right, but also what I think as well is that wokeness, or let's say, you know, whatever he calls it, like the purity spiral or whatever, right? This kind of puritanism around whatever the topic happens to be, I think becomes a very convenient stick to beat other people with. Okay, and look, you know, you might be concerned about I don't know, certain woke kinds of manifestations, but we saw this with the Christ pill, right? You know, we saw this with the Christ pill guys as well, who are conservatives, who are Christians, and they're using their religion and their beliefs to beat other people over the head with. Okay, so it's like, you're not good enough, you're evil, you're a sinner, you're a degenerate because you're not like me, you're not as good as me. It's exactly the same as what the woke people are doing on the other side of the fence. You know, you're not as good as me because you're not as tolerant, you're not as this, you're not as that. Like, everybody does it, both whether it's the left, whether it's the right, whether it's religious, whether it's atheist, whatever. Everybody does it. Everybody's got this standard of like, I'm right because these are my beliefs. These are why my beliefs are right, and you're a fucking idiot because, or you're wrong, or you're evil, or you're degenerate because you're not doing it how I think you should be doing it. Now, when you've got a cause that is, in theory, grounded in morality, like religion or like certain ideas on the woke side of things, then that makes the device even more effective, okay? Because then you feel like right is on your side. Like, not only do you get to attack these other people and feel good about yourself, but you are morally right to do, you're even morally obligated to do so, okay? And I think that's a very addictive thing for people to have. I think it's problematic. So yeah, I think that a lot of this stuff is being weaponized, okay, in the culture, which is not a good thing.
This with late night shows in America, they're tyrannical behind the scenes, but out front, nicer than nice. We see this with Lizzo, someone who's supposed to be standing up for these bigger girls and giving them a platform.
I thought Ellen DeGeneres was the
forward.
best one. Ellen DeGeneres, who led the kind of woke campaign, turned out to be an awful piece of work and ends up, of course, being cancelled herself at the altar of her own cancel culture.
Yeah, the standards you judge others by will be the standards that you are judged by. You should be very, very careful with that.
Absolutely, and that's why I try not to judge other people too harshly, to be honest, because I kind of, well, look, I'm a bit of a libertarian anyway. I kind of feel like people can do what they want to do. Yes, there are consequences to actions, but who am I to tell you to do this? Who am I to tell this girl not to do OnlyFans? Who am I to tell, you know, X, Y, and Z? I think everybody can do what they want, but you have to have an understanding of cause and effect and what the effects of your actions might potentially be. Okay, so we got some stuff here. I love your videos. Will you do more of the street interviews content? Yes, probably. I think we've got some from Colombia coming up, and we'll probably do some in London. It'll be good in London when it gets a little bit warmer. You know, it's a bit cold at the moment, but it'll be good when people are out and about more. Those are quite fun. There's also, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but on the channel, if you type in Mexico on this channel, you'll see some like Mexico street interviews we did as well. SJ says, Psych Hacks is great. Dr. Orion doesn't pander. It's raw and brutal, honestly, yet clinical. He is great. Well, you know, I'm a big fan. Eric Linden, most chads suck at dating relationship advice. They've never had to work for it. True. Although, if you count Tusk as being a chad, his advice is very good because he has taken the time to really analyze it and learn it. SJ, teach MLD approaching would be great content. Well, he approaches anyway. He knows what he's doing. Marriage causes divorce. Chads are given a lot of leeway and forgiveness. They can act weird and creepy, and girls will just laugh it off. Yeah, to an extent. Depends on context, but I know what you mean. Troy, why do you live in Berlin? Worst mess of a town for dating I've ever been. Did you hear about the recent syphilis statistics for Berlin? Well, no, and I don't live in Berlin. I'm in London, so it doesn't really affect me. But I would imagine the syphilis stats are off the charts in Berlin. I should imagine. Troy, would you ever reach out to Chris? He hosts many guests from niche subjects, not just Peterson and Co. Might be a good meeting of minds to chat with him. Well, as I said, right. So basically, we were in contact. Okay, I was in contact with him. We had a bit of an email thing going back and forward with Tusk. We haven't spoken for a while. The issue is that in that time, he's now suddenly gone from. I mean, he was big anyway, but now he's become stratospheric. So whether he would. His appetite for that, I don't know. But yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll drop him an interview after this. Maybe I'll send him this and see what he thinks, and we can get the dialogue going. Let's see. I mean, I think if there's one thing I think that I bring to the table and Tusk brings to the table as well, is that we are actually out there. We are actually teaching guys. We're seeing what's going out there in the real world. We're not just relying on data. And we're going to many, many different countries and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there could be some value there, but it's more down to his appetite for it, really.
Let me ask you.
Sorry, Eric says there are some crazy red pill and black pill people out there giving themselves a bad name. We have to sort them out ourselves. True. You need to just exercise. You need to exercise. It's gut instinct, really. Like, do you feel like this person is coming from a good place? Do you feel like this person has good information? I feel like that with Psych Hacks. I feel like that actually with Casey Zander. Okay. I feel like that with Chris Williamson. I'm not saying he doesn't sugarcoat things sometimes, because maybe he does, but I think that he's at least asking the right questions. I don't feel like it as much with some other content creators. So I think gut feeling is very important here. Eric says Psych Hacks with Dr. Taraban is one of the best channels out there. Great advice for sure. More questions, please. More comments.
One thing that struck me about young people is the amount of anxiety that exists in people, between the age of maybe like 25 and 17, 16, is unbelievable and terrifying. And people are wrestling with why this is. And it's leading in many cases to them taking their own lives, but also massive amounts of medication in that age bracket. What is going on here?
I think that there is a pathologization and a medicalization and a glorification of normal human emotions. If you live in a world which is incredibly comfortable and typically day to day, you don't have to deal with that much discomfort. You just did a segment and you were in a room that is purposefully designed to have heavy things in that you go in and pick up and put down in the same place. Yeah. It's called a gym. And that's because we have removed so many of the heavy objects that we need to live from daily life that we have to artificially create this and add it in. My point being that when existence is very comfortable, any discomfort feels like an aberration. It feels like a curse. And the more that we make existence comfortable and convenient, not to say I want air conditioning, I like cruise control on a car, all of those things, but it makes people hypersensitized. I think on top of that, there is this very strange therapy culture speak where it is the pathologization of normal human emotions. It's not that you're upset, it's that you're depressed. It's not that someone was mean to you, it's that they caused you trauma. We need to be very, very careful. And an ex-Love Island contestant, Dr. Alex, who I think actually has some role at the British government, started a campaign that was like happy pills or share your SSRI thing. And it's videos, IG videos of him putting with SSRIs on his tongue. The amount of overprescription that we have at the moment for SSRIs is insane.
Yeah, so I don't know what he's referring to there, but I think the central concept of this pathologization of normal human emotion and the normal human condition is very apt and very present in contemporary society. And this is what we talk about all the time. This is what myself and James talk about all the time. We are living in possibly one of the most pussified ages in the whole history of the world. Okay, for the most part. Look, I'm sitting in London. I'm not in Kyiv, right? I'm not in Gaza. So obviously, you know, given my geographical location where I am, I have certain advantages. But nevertheless, in the West, in the Anglosphere, in the main, we are living an incredibly privileged and soft life. And like he says, in order to do anything physically demanding, we go to a place called a gym, which is this weird place where you have to pay, you know, up to $100 a month in order to pick up heavy stuff and put it down again. Or, you know, you might go to a fighting martial arts thing or whatever, which is very safely all put together and it's all health and safety and all that kind of stuff. We're living in this very, very pussified age. And the upshot of that, and this manifests in the dating market, is that when you're trying to teach guys to do dating and you say to them, okay, so look, this week I want you to go out and I want you to go and talk to 5 women that you don't know. Just go and say hello. Just go and say, hey, listen, I think you look very nice. I think you look cute. You've got great style. Anyway, have a nice day. The amount of guys who can't even do that is absolutely staggering. All right? They can't even, like, imagine what our ancestors had to do. You know, wrestling a fucking mammoth, or I don't know, fighting a bear, or like a marauding army, you know, for hand-to-hand combat. Okay, we can't even walk up to a member of the opposite sex in Starbucks and say that she's got nice style. Like, we are so pussified, we are so in our own heads, we are so cosseted and wrapped up in cotton wool. Okay, and I'm actually speaking from a slightly different perspective here because I'm an old git now, right? So I'm from a generation. I'm actually from a sort of pre-internet generation. Okay, so I sort of straddle the two in a way because it did used to be a bit different when I was younger. But certainly for people in, you know, Generation X and then Generation, is it Gen X? No, Gen Y and Gen Z. You know, who've been brought up with the internet, and we're all just sitting at home and we're on a computer and we're getting delivery. I mean, it's just, we are so fortunate, and the problem with it is, on the one hand, yeah, it's great. Like he says, you know, it's nice to have air conditioning. It's nice to have a comfortable chair to sit in, you know, a nicely heated room or whatever. But at the same time, it causes us these problems because we're not tough enough to do the very, very fundamental things of human life, you know? Like go and talk to a woman we don't know. I mean, it's absolutely pathetic. And this is where figures like Tate and people will come in to play. And however problematic a character you think him or not, you know, like Chris said, he's at least trying to address the balance here because men are increasingly pussified. Now, whether there's an agenda behind that or not, whether you believe that is up to you. I don't know. But it's certainly what's happening, okay? And, you know, if you're sitting here watching this and, you know, you're not taking care of business, you're not working on yourself daily, you know, you're not training daily, you're not eating a good diet, you're not fucking going out there and making things happen, then you are part of the problem, okay? Or at least you only have yourself to blame if you're in a situation in life that you're not happy with.
Amount of people that are on these drugs that have very, very spurious effects. They've been replication crisis quite heavily. There is a use for them, but it's not as wide as they should think. And there was a study that came out last week that said exercise is more effective than SSRIs. And then you just had a video that you put on the segment before this of some guy in the gym, maybe trying to battle away his demons, maybe trying to stave off his use of SSRIs.
By a woman. Who, if it had been the other way around, all hell would have broken loose.
I'm not sure what happened there. He was obviously training shirtless. I don't know if she was flaming him for training shirtless or whatever, but that's interesting. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? That exercise is better than SSRIs for depression. I need to have a look at that study, but, you know, I mean, SSRIs have become increasingly under scrutiny and, you know, criticized over the years, so it wouldn't surprise me.
The hypocrisy and double standard is real. Also, I think with young people, and this is not just about young men, it's about women as well. Social media and phones, cell phones, have completely changed things as well. And I think obviously a lot for good. I think they're very intelligent as a group of people, the ones I meet. They're very bright, they're sparky, they're well-informed, but they're getting a constant churn of dopamine, a lot of it very negative. They're seeing wars in real time all over their social media, the most horrific imagery. And they're seeing loads of other stuff, just constantly bombarded with negative imagery in a way that, when I was young, it was unthinkable. You didn't have cell phones. There was, maybe a television with 2 channels, very heavily sanitized and regulated. The newspapers were very cautious about what they put on their front pages and so on. You just did not get exposed to anything like this kind of sensory overload. How much do you think that is playing into this?
Hugely. Jonathan Haidt's work on the coddling of the American mind. He's got a new book out soon called The Anxious Generation. It seems to be a huge impact. The human brain is not designed to consume the entire world's news, the worst of the world's news, disproportionately selected 24 hours a day in real time, fed into our brains. I saw a meme the other day that said, sorry, I didn't reply to you. I'm trying to handle the entire world's information with a brain that was designed to collect nuts in a forest. And it's so true.
But
we're not built for this.
Yeah,
it's what's referred to as an evolutionary mismatch, that we have hypernormal stimuli in the modern world that we are not
just speed it up slightly here for time purposes.
Developed to be able to deal with. I think one of the best things that everybody can do, I'm big into life hacks, right? You mentioned it on the show, on Modern Wisdom. We did this huge series of life hacks. The most high impact thing that people can do right now, sleep with your phone outside of your bedroom. If you put the charging cable for your phone right now in the kitchen or in the hallway or somewhere else that isn't your bedroom, and before you go to bed in the nighttime, plug it in there, it will save. Your sleep will improve. You won't be spending as much time on your phone. You won't be rolling over when you can't sleep during the middle of the night and using it. Oh, your YouTube's only ever 3 feet away from you. And then on a morning, just try and delay that time as much as possible before you pick it up, because once you're in it, you get sucked in. So intermittent fasting for your phone, I'm all for it.
You're also all for something called...
I'm terrible at that, by the way.
Fapping, which I have to say I wasn't familiar with until
I'm not convinced. This sounds like fake news to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you're not fake. You've gone from mainstream media to YouTube, and you're just prepared to throw fake news out.
Is it completely invented, this thing?
Fapping is a thing, but are you saying I'm pro-fapping or anti-fapping or just a pathological fapper?
I didn't even know what fapping was, but apparently you...
Fapping,
Explain.
I'm what?
Why is your name associated so much with fapping?
I mean... Look, I'm a fapping connoisseur. What can I say? No, I've done a number of videos. No fap is a movement online of men holding themselves back from touching themselves. It is a movement that's tangential to anti-porn, but there's also varying degrees of depth to this. One including that some guys on the Reddit thread think that they can levitate after a while if they do it for long enough.
Which is absolute bollocks, by the way. I mean, look, I've always been very skeptical about the no fap thing. I mean, I think, yes, if you're fapping the whole time, that's not a good place to be. If you think that you're going to get superhuman powers just because you abstain from hand love, then that's bollocks as well, I'm afraid. It just doesn't really work like that. But at the same time, I think cutting it down, and certainly porn is definitely problematic. But yeah, it definitely gets overly talked up on the internet.
I'm not sure where the research team pulled the no fap thing out, but I'm happy to be associated with it. If you want me as the front runner for fapping, so be it.
I don't want you to be anything you don't want to be. I mean, you're Chris Williamson.
Let's just talk about fapping, Piers. We're on YouTube now. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You can just let loose.
It's kind of interesting. I have no idea if it's right or not. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe we should all be heading down that road.
Maybe you're doing it right now under the desk. Who knows?
Do you find a lot of mythology grows about you the bigger you get on YouTube?
Mythology. I have a very effective... I seem to have a really good sweet spot at the moment. The amount of exposure that I have hasn't caused there to be any crazy security scares or any sort of really unwanted attention. It's perfect, but I know that that's maybe not always going to be the way that it is. I also have, I think, not too obsessive of a fan base. They love what I do and they support what I do, but it's not the same way as, they're not digging into the lore of my background. Maybe because it's, mostly been out there on the internet. You just watch Love Island a little bit and go to a few club nights in the mid noughties and the mid tens and you'll be able to find me.
I think the reason for that might be because of the nature of what Chris does, because he's very much he's somebody who brings to the fore other people, if that makes sense. And I mean that with the absolute maximum respect, but he kind of will bring other people in and showcase them, and so maybe that's why the focus has been less on him as a character versus some of the people that he's brought onto his show, which I think again very smart strategy, and has worked out very, very well for him, and and great content, because the thing that he does do very well is have conversations. I mean, he's a great conversationalist. He's able to ask the right questions, probe in the right way, but also not in a way that's gonna, and this is, you know, some of the criticisms leveled here, but not in the way that's gonna scare the horses, and he's gonna get into trouble. And I think that's important, because when you're getting mainstream, you have to skate the line between, okay, we're gonna say some stuff that's somewhat contentious, but how do we say it so that we don't get banned off the platform? And otherwise, these conversations aren't going to happen. So it is important.
But no, right now I'm really enjoying this balance. It feels good. But I'm also aware that this is maybe a Goldilocks zone when there's enough attention that it's nice, but very quickly that might change into something else. So I'm kind of starting to emotionally and psychologically prepare myself for that.
There are other topics that you talk a lot about, and you talk a lot about alcohol, diet, sport, all that kind of thing. Are they all interwoven? I mean, you're a fit guy, obviously, pretty clean living from what I've read and heard. Is that also part of the secret cocktail of contentment, or what's the answer?
The alcohol thing was interesting because I was a club promoter for a decade and a half. I adored working in that industry. I loved and was very proud of what I achieved. But I got toward the end of my 20s and realized that all of the personal development things I wanted to do seemed to be held back by me electing to ruin 36 or 48 hours, depending on how hard I went, every couple of weeks. I wasn't a big drinker. I didn't drink all the time, but I drank enough to kind of reset my meditation streak or my diet or my training or whatever. And I decided to go sober, elective sobriety. And it was very, very useful for me. I found it unbelievably productive. I was very focused. I had great consistency. And I actually preferred being sober to going back drinking. Now, alcohol is in a unique category of drugs where it's the only drug where if you don't do it, people assume that you have a problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely true, and I can say that from personal experience.
People aren't asking you why you're not on cocaine.
Yeah, are you okay?
What would you mean? Yeah. Whereas with alcohol, there's an assumption, oh my God, there must be something wrong, because that's how ingrained it is into the culture. And for me, again, it's all about consistency. Consistency is the important thing. And if you want to make really, really big changes, you need a routine. And unfortunately, the British, Larry, lad drinking culture that we have, that I wholeheartedly contribute to and still think it has its place in a young person's upbringing, isn't always conducive if you want to try and make big changes in your life.
Do you end up, though, with, by default, almost a more boring friendship group? I mean, do you avoid people who like a drink and a laugh and a party? Do you end up having, by comparison, a more boring life? And is it consumed by people who are all pretty straight-laced and clean living? And for many people watching who are not as disciplined, might find that a bit of a turn-off.
That assumes that people who drink a lot are interesting. And in my experience,
yeah,
that is...
He makes a good point there. I mean, for myself, you know, I haven't drunk for a couple of decades, and you know, so most of my, not all of it, but a lot of my adult, you know, social experience has been sober, and a lot of it has been surrounded by people who are drunk or off their tits, and you know, for me, it hasn't been a problem, because I don't, like what Piers seems to be saying is, if you don't drink, then you can't ever hang around with anyone who does drink, and if you know. So you're going to hang around with these very boring, like, wellness type people. That hasn't been my personal experience. That hasn't been my personal choice. I just carried on hanging around with the same people. I would just say, listen, for me personally, you know, the alcohol is not a thing. It's not good for me. You do you. I'm good, okay? And yeah, sometimes that can get a bit boring if they get a bit leery and they get a little bit like this or a little bit like that, whatever. But for the most part, it's been cool. And also, I hang around with the more boring people who don't drink as well. You know, more of the wellness people. So I get the best of both worlds. Yeah, I mean, look, alcohol is a whole other subject, but come on, it's like, so, like he says, you know, you get hammered at the weekend, even if it's just the weekend, you ruin like 48 hours plus of your life. You know, think about the productivity that's being taken out. Think about the time you're just wasting, you know, with getting the drunk, when you're drunk, waking up with the hangover, getting over the hangover, blah, blah, blah. It's just such a time sink. It really, really is.
Actually, the opposite. So many people don't have friends. They have drinking partners, especially in their early 20s. They have a group of people that they go out and get wrecked with. They do not have a community of people that...
Oh, JBB, 14 months sober here after a 35-day program. Congratulations, man. That's fantastic. One day at a time, but that's really, really good, bro. That's fantastic.
Are really interesting to them. If the only way that you can hang around with your friends is to get drunk, to sedate yourself so that they actually seem interesting, that's not the group of friends for you. You can find significantly better friends that you can go out and get drunk, and maybe that makes it fun.
Okay, let me pull you up on that. So I grew up in a country pub. So I grew up around people when I was young who would come in, they'd be incredibly dull for about 20 minutes, have a couple of pints, and suddenly they'd have a life and soul. So I can see that alcohol, as long as it wasn't being abused, could actually be an enhancing tool to making people who are perhaps a little bit introvert or a little bit boring, whatever it may be, come in.
I think,
and I can tell you from my own sons, for example, my oldest boy likes to go out a couple of times a week and hit the nightclub scene. He's got loads of great mates. They have a good time. It's in moderation. The other 5 days are pretty abstemious and so on. But they love that, and he's got really nice friends. But they love to go and have a bit of a party twice a week. My middle boy is an actor and boxer and so on. He thinks, you know, his body's a temple like you, and he'd be nodding away to everything you're saying. But I can see that both of them have really good groups of friends. They're just a little bit different, and I don't see that alcohol needs to be demonized unless you're basically using it like a demon.
I would agree with that as well. I think some people have a problem with alcohol. Most people don't, to be frank. I would say it's probably a minority of people who have whatever the addictive gene is, that, or whatever component it is that makes you find it very hard to stop drinking once you start. So for me, it was a question of, okay, I pick up the drink, and then you kind of don't know where you're going to end up. You might just have a couple and be at home, and that's fine. Or you might wake up 3 days later and you're in Paris. And you're like, how the hell did I get here? And when you're that kind of drinker, and it's starting to cause you problems, and it's starting to cause you consequences, they say when drinking costs you more than money, then you've got a problem. Most people in general, they can be heavy drinkers, but they know when to put it down. They know when to stop. They'll take a break. And that's kind of okay. I don't have any huge problem with that. I think it is problematic when it gets to that stage for certain people who are wired in such a way that they can't control it. And people think, oh, it's about willpower, just have more willpower. Well, but it's not about willpower, because the very nature of alcoholism as a condition, you might not want to call it a disease, but as a condition, is that willpower doesn't work. Because if willpower worked, then nobody would ever, in the end, people wouldn't die of alcoholism, because they'd just be like, oh shit, I need to do the willpower thing now, otherwise I'm going to die. And in the end, people do die of this. So I think for certain people, it's incredibly problematic. For many people, it isn't. They might, benefit from cutting down a bit, but they don't have the thing. Okay. So you need to decide, you need to look at your life and determine for yourself whether you have the ism, as they call it, whether you are alcoholic as opposed to just being somebody who likes to party and likes to drink.
No, I would agree. And this is where I got in trouble with both the partying community for being a hypocrite that I ran nightclubs and was going sober. And then I got in trouble with the sobriety community for being someone who had gone sober and then extolled the virtues of alcohol. Anyone who thinks that alcohol can't make a night out better hasn't had a good night out. Yes. And they should come to Newcastle in the northeast of the UK.
I've had a couple of big nights out in Newcastle. I can attest to that.
Yes. So look, that's the first thing that I need to say about it. Secondly, I think that you can periodize these things. And this is what I found was really useful for me. So I would do 6 months of sobriety, usually from the start of the year or maybe just before Christmas, because you can get through the hardest bit, which is the Christmas period when your willpower is at its highest, as opposed to at the very end where you go, I'll just finish it a little bit. And I worked very hard on introspection and reflection and all the rest of this stuff. And then I was like, okay, it's the back end of summer and maybe I can have a couple of, and how do I feel about alcohol? And I tell you something else, resetting your alcohol sensitivity is so fantastic, because lots of the bad effects come from the overconsumption. The reason you're overconsuming is because you're not feeling the effects. So if you make yourself more sensitive, you can have a little bit of a buzz on and not feel so bad the next day. So I think 6 months of sobriety every couple of years for people is a very good
Well, I actually had it because I got COVID.
I don't think that would work for me personally. I think I would just be back on the merry-go-round. But, if that works for him, that's great. I mean, different strokes for different folks. For me personally, abstinence has been the solution, because the way that I react to substances in general, and not just substances, but sort of anything that's going to make me feel better, that's going to change my mood, is that once I get a bit of it, I just want more and more and more of it, okay? I have a very compulsive nature. I have what you might call an addictive nature. And so I'm not sure that the model that he's talking about would really work for me. But, who knows? Just have a look at the different options and see what you think. But you've got to determine for yourself, really, if you are somebody who actually has a problem with this, or if you just need to, cut it down a little bit.
And then got long COVID. It's a couple of years ago. And I lost my taste and smell. So there was no point in drinking alcohol because I couldn't smell it or taste it. It was all like water, literally. And it was heartbreaking to crack open a bottle of my favorite French, Chateau Bataille and discover it literally tasted like a glass of water. It was the weirdest thing. But I gave up all alcohol for about 6 months, shredded the weight. I mean, I've never been as fit. In fact, my nutritionist, don't laugh, I do have one. She said that my numbers, when she tested me after 6 months, were actually better than hers, right? Because I wasn't basically pouring stuff into my body that I didn't need to. But I can't begin to tell you the joy when my taste came back, that first glass of wine afterwards. And I can't lie about it.
Well, that's what life is. Life is, it is push and pull. It is vacancy, and it is saturation of things. And I think that dance is good. But how many people that are listening to this right now, especially a lot of the British people, the last time that they went more than a month without consuming alcohol was when they were 14. Yeah. It was before they had their first drink. And if there was any other drug, people talk about something like creatine, one of the most researched compounds in health and fitness. Oh, well, you don't want to be on something all the time, so maybe you could cycle off. Meanwhile, this person goes out to the pub once or twice a week for eternity.
Good point.
I completely agree. You talk a lot also about men versus women, not versus, but men and women, and that interaction. There was a bombshell.
JBB says, when a drink becomes your first waking thought of the day, then it's a problem. Yes, I would agree with that.
A survey came out this week revealing there are differences between the two sexes, which was probably the least surprising news I've ever seen described as news in the history of planet Earth. But you talk a lot about things like, what do modern women actually want from men? Why aren't men approaching women in person anymore? Red flags in dating you should never ignore. My take on this is that the whole dating game has become extremely nerve-wracking. For both sides, actually, but particularly for men who no longer feel comfortable that they know the rules of engagement. And it may be that women themselves aren't that clued up to what they should be doing, shouldn't be doing, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, because it's been so much stuff, Me Too, Time's Up, all these campaigns, demonizing not just bad men, but actually men generally until they can prove otherwise. It's led to a very perilous environment, I would say.
So this is where we're getting more to the meat and drink of the dating content.
For dating, right?
Massive risk aversion across the board. And this isn't just in dating, this isn't everything else. Young people are getting their driver's licenses later, they're moving out of their house later, they're getting their first job later, but they're also particularly sensitive and tentative when it comes to the world of dating. And who could be surprised? The post-Me Too world made men potential attackers of women and made women potential accusers of men. So I'm not surprised that we're talking about a very sensitive, very risk-averse dating environment. 86% of women said that they want a man to make the first move. 76% of men.
Let's just hear that again, because these are some interesting stats here.
Of men. So I'm not surprised that we're talking about a very sensitive, very risk-averse dating environment. 86% of women said that they want a man to make the first move. 76% of men say that they are scared of making a first move for being seen as creepy. And 20% of Gen Z guys and girls say that a man approaching a woman in public always or usually constitutes harassment.
I mean, that's just crazy, isn't it? Like, always or usually constitutes harassment. I mean, what if he just goes up and asks, where the Brussels sprouts are or where the bananas are in the supermarket or something? I mean, it's... And yet, we've got that big statistic that he mentioned before that 86% of women actually want guys to make the first move. So... they talk about it now, but we're in this very strange sort of period in society where there are these opposing things going on.
So let's try and square this circle, okay? Yeah. Women mostly want to be approached, but are scared of being approached because this person might not be safe or have their best interests at heart.
I don't know that they are... Well, look, I can't speak for all women. I don't know that they're scared of being approached. I think they don't want to be approached by the wrong guys. And the wrong guys, of course, are, drumroll please, the guys they don't find attractive. So if it's Chris Williamson and he makes the approach, that's probably cool. If it's not, and it's a guy that she doesn't regard as attractive, then that could be seen as creepy and all the rest of it. And, that's problematic, okay? And it's for a variety of reasons, because for a start, as long as the guy is not doing anything disrespectful, he doesn't have any bad intentions, he's just going over to say hello. She might not think he's attractive. Okay, fine. She can just say, I've got a boyfriend, whatever. That should be fine, in my opinion. I don't think any terrible line has been crossed there. Actually, I wouldn't, in my view, say that constitutes harassment. But it does depend on the manner in which he does it and the calibration with which he does it, of course, and the situation, the circumstances, etc. So a number of things come into it. But I think that they love the idea of being approached, but they want to be approached by the top tier guy.
Men know that if they don't do the approaching, that nothing's going to happen, because most women want to be the gatekeeper and the receptacle rather than the protagonist. But if they do it, then maybe they're going to make her feel uncomfortable, and I wouldn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. Maybe I'm a part of some terrible Me Too thing, or I'm part of some gym TikTok video where I approach a girl and then I'm going to go viral online and everyone's going to call me awful things. Right. So you just have two completely different worlds, and these two groups are moving apart. I think that two things can be two quite easy remedies for this. For guys, an understanding that approach anxiety has always been there, and that if you're respectful and delicate and take signals appropriately, nothing bad is probably going to happen.
I think that's true. I think that's true, and I think that's the more sane way of looking at this. Because yes, of course, like some of the stuff he mentions, yes, you get those viral TikTok videos. Yes, you get women who have gone to social media to complain about these things. But those really are the minority of cases. For the majority of the time, if the guy, like he says, is polite, respectful, and calibrated, okay, and that's the big elephant in the room, because you've got to be able to read social cues. You've got to be able to understand what's happening. You've got to be somewhat emotionally intelligent to kind of understand her and look at how she's responding to this and look at what's happening around you and everything. But if you've got that down, you go up, you're very respectful, you're polite, you're doing this in a very non-threatening way, it should be a good experience for both of you. And most of the time, It is, even in 2024. Okay, and I think that the cases we see that hit social media tend to be the outliers rather than the norm.
And then secondly, for women, cultivating receptiveness. So there was a time during the British aristocracy where ladies would drop a handkerchief near a gentleman that they liked, and it would give that opportunity
for the
gentleman
to
come forward. Handkerchief dropping, I'm telling you. But my point being, like, if you're at a bar,
I know what you mean.
Assume the guy that you're potentially attracted to and would like to come over and speak to you is a particularly slow golden retriever. Like, that's the level of signaling that guys need, especially in this world where no doesn't just mean no. Anything appropriating not hell yeah is stay away from me, and you might end up on the wrong side of a call out.
I mean, I read that 40% of marriages used to begin in the workplace, and historically, where a man...
Yeah, so I think the advice there for women is good as well. If you're out and about and you see a dude, and you're interested, or you think I mean, I saw a Reddit thing about this. I think I might be doing a video on it soon, where a girl was saying she went to this cafe and there was this dude, and he sat down next to her, on 2 days running, and they started a bit of a conversation. Second day, started talking to her, and she made like a one-word answer and then kind of went back to her work and everything. I mean, what would have been better, since she was interested in her, was maybe, continue that conversation a little bit. Like, maybe ask him a few questions about himself. Because, as Chris says, I mean, guys are in this predicament where they don't want to overstep the mark. So even if, and the very fact that guy even spoke to her, that was maybe more than a lot of dudes would do. Okay, so he actually spoke to her. They'd smiled, blah, blah, blah. And then he asks her a question, and she kind of just goes, oh, yeah, I'm here to study, and then just kind of carries on with her work. Now, if she'd have said, oh, how about you? Are you going to work? Or what are your plans for the day? Then a conversation, and that's not her putting herself on the line in a way of like asking him out or having to do the heavy legwork, but it is giving him that opportunity to continue the interaction. So I think women also need to be cognizant of this, because, and this is a drawback for women, because 86% of women are saying they want to be approached, okay? But the environment has become, and it was difficult before, because like they said, approach anxiety was always there. It was always difficult for dudes to approach women. And now it's even more difficult because of all these other things. So I think for the women watching, or who watch this later on the replay, you've got to be at least somewhat receptive and maybe help him out a little bit. I'm not saying you have to, ask him on the date or ask for his number or anything like that, but I think that you should at least maybe facilitate the conversation continuing so that he feels comfortable enough to proceed down that direction.
And would be in a higher position than the woman, just because historically men were in the senior jobs. That's obviously changed dramatically. But also, I can't imagine how anybody finds anyone to date, let alone marry at work, given all the new rules of workplace engagement.
I'm pretty sure, I think it's Netflix that has a stipulation, or had a stipulation, about the amount of time that a man's eyes could linger on a person of the opposite sex, that there was an upper bound. Beyond 7 seconds, that's the toxic male gaze. I know that there were adverts on the London Underground warning about this. And as with all of the things, you spoke about
there were
the sort of tyranny of the minority and then this sort of woke thing earlier on as well. As with all of these things, there's kernels of truth in all of this. There absolutely are super weird guys that stare at women on the tube and make them feel uncomfortable.
And there is a lot of them. But that doesn't mean that everything has to change to accommodate a sense that everyone's like that. Otherwise, nothing is ever going to... It'll be the death of mankind.
Well, the issue and the priority of safetyism, of trying to remove any of the edge cases of risk in an attempt to make all risk cases removed, what is the downstream consequence of it?
Yeah, interesting. So he talks about the edge cases of risk. Okay, so he's talking about the peripheral risk. Because as he said, I mean, yeah, for sure, there are super fucking creepy guys on the tube. I've seen videos of like really, really fucking creepy guys. He sits opposite her. He's just like staring at her. That's an extreme case, and that shouldn't happen. That should be condemned, and that guy should be, get into trouble. But, that's very different to a guy who's well put together. He sees a girl he finds attractive, and he would like to look at her and maybe smile at her, but he feels compelled not to because he thinks that he might get into trouble. And he has no bad intentions whatsoever. In fact, he might actually be a very good catch, and she might actually like him if she was given the opportunity to meet him.
Like, how many weird guys on tubes are stopped for how many millions of guys not approaching a girl? And you may say, your balance sheet may say, no woman should ever be made to feel uncomfortable on a tube. And that's your prerogative of your value set. But if it was, and this is going to stop 1 million relationships, or 10,000 relationships, or 1,000 relationships, there is a balance sheet that we have to think about here. And this is the same. It's the same for everything. It's not just about men and women in dating. It's about what sort of jokes should be taught. Where should we have the watershed? Why is it 9 o'clock or 9:30? Why isn't it 8:30? Why isn't it 10 o'clock? All of these things are adjudications that we make, and we're getting increasingly bad at making them.
Absolutely. So marriage causes divorce says women should do the approaching because they are the picky ones. Lol. Ha ha ha. I don't think it's going to happen, but I know what you mean. JBB says it helps if the women do a little bit of the lifting when it comes to carrying on the conversation. Well, sometimes they do. I mean, if she's into you, she will. But it's not really... I mean, there's a couple of things. Firstly, they don't have to because they've got options. And secondly, she may not want to because she may want to see how proficient you are at carrying the conversation. And if you're not able to carry the conversation, then she's going to think, okay, right, this dude is not strong enough. You know, he's not dominant enough. He doesn't have the skill set that I require. And so she's going to sort of like use it as a test, if that makes sense. JBB, because she could totally find you attractive, but if the conversation could go awkward, it's tough to keep it going, blow the whole approach. Yeah, but she's just going to blame you. You know, she's just going to blame you. It's like, for her, it's going to be like, okay, well, I did find him kind of attractive, but he was a bit of a wuss because like if there's a boring conversation on a date, the woman doesn't think, oh shit, what could I have done to make that conversation better? For the most part, the woman thinks, do you know what? I had a lucky escape because actually that guy was a bit of a chump because he couldn't hold a conversation. All right. Even if the conversation was ostensibly boring because of the topics that she brought up. And this is why you have to learn about conversation skills and moving the conversation on so that you're not talking about boring shit. So if she's banging on about her job and, you know, the HR department and all this kind of crap, and you just go with that and you talk about that for 2 hours, she comes out of the date, she's like, fuck, man, that was boring. Now, it may have been her that initiated that subject matter, but you're still going to be the one that gets blamed because she's going to associate those feelings of boredom, those negative feelings with you because you didn't do anything to spike it up.
Moved to America pretty much full time now. How do you find it? I've lived and worked in America for the last 20 years. It's an amazing country with amazing people. The can-do mentality absolutely exists there, and they don't have the kind of class structure issues that we have here. We have other issues, obviously. But how do you find the difference culturally between the two countries?
It's over 9K says, like Pearl always says, if it goes bad on the guys. The woman never takes accountability. Well, yeah, but again, you know, women have this luxury of, for the most part, being the selectors, right? They don't really, you know, if you're getting hit up for dates, you know, 20 times a week or whatever it is, right? You know, you're getting thousands of DMs. Then, you know, you're going to meet some of those guys, and you don't have to make, you know, like, yeah, maybe he's good looking, but probably the next 5 guys in the inbox are good looking as well. So it's like you don't really have to make a lot of the effort. And in fact, it might actually behoove her not to make too much of an effort because what she's looking for is a guy who can command the room, who has that riz, who has that charisma, who can draw her in. And if you don't have that, or at least if you don't demonstrate that, then she will then think, okay, well, I didn't sleep with him and that was the right decision because he wasn't the right man for me. Now, this has happened to me. I mean, this will happen to you sometimes. You know, you can meet a woman who is initially, it appears by all of the, you know, signals, it appears she's kind of interested in you. Maybe she likes you physically, she likes the way you look or whatever. But if you drop the ball as far as the conversation is concerned, she can lose attraction very quickly, okay? And this is why when we talk about game, we're not really talking about trying to convince people who aren't initially into us to be into us. You know, this isn't a sales thing so much. It's more just like, okay, there's some initial interest here. Now I have to not drop the ball. Now I have to ensure that attraction that she has, that nascent attraction, doesn't fizzle out because I fuck it up on the date. Username says, Troy is the man, very knowledgeable on dating, great insight and advice. Thank you very much, sir. Very much appreciated. Please subscribe to the channel if you have.
They are very enthusiastic people, and I flourish around enthusiasm and excitement. Americans kind of have permanent first-line cocaine energy.
What a line.
At all times.
No pun intended. Americans have permanent first-line cocaine energy. What a great line.
And I really wish that I could re-import it back over to the UK. I want to make enthusiasm great again. I really think that we can do with that.
The British people, we tend to view overly enthusiastic people with deep suspicion because we're naturally quite a cynical, piss-taking bunch. And so if someone's too hyper-enthusiastic, you know, you come along, Chris, you're bouncing off the walls, you're handsome, you're fit, everything's going for you, you're making millions.
Please keep going.
And you're giving it the full 9 enthusiastic yards. Like, not a British bloke will be like, oh, shut up, Williamson. They want to poke you a bit. They want to bring you down a peg or two. That's the British way. I know the difference, but I'm not sure it's necessarily a bad thing.
No, look, horses for courses. I understand the British desire for sardonic wit and banter and all of that sort of stuff. But a couple of things I realized, despite the fact that I was the director, leader of this events company, you know, crafting British culture for a long time, was on Love Island, was on Take Me Out, you know, did all of the things, model TV, all that stuff. I flourish significantally more around people that are positive, around people that when you tell them, dude, I just got an invite to go on Joe Rogan, they don't go, ooh, look at you. Instead, they go, dude, that is so awesome. Like, I'm really proud of you. Well done. Those are my people.
Yes, I think that is a good nugget of advice. I mean, obviously we've heard this before, but I mean, the people that you surround yourself with, so important. You want to be around positive people. You want to be around positive energy. You don't want to be around people that bring you down. And sometimes, even not in the success of Chris Williamson, but even in a dating context, or you're trying to do some self-improvement, you're trying to transform, you're trying to become better, maybe you're trying to go out there and talk to more women, you're trying to become more sociable, you're trying to dress better, and your mates, the people that you, particularly if you've known the same group of people for a long time, you've surrounded yourself with these same dudes, if they start to then, as he says, take the piss, they start to try and bring you down. So like, oh, Troy, what are you doing? Why are you wearing that fancy stuff? Why, oh, look at you going talking to those girls. You're going to get blown out, and they try to reduce your vibe. It's that crabs in a bucket kind of thing. They're pulling you down. And he's right. I mean, one thing about a lot of American culture, I'm not all American culture, but one thing about a lot of American culture is there is a lot of positivity there, which I think is a good thing. And I don't know how much of his success you would attribute to the fact that he went to America, because I'm not quite sure of the timeline, but I would imagine that it certainly helped him a lot, because he's put himself in an environment, as he says, where there's a lot of positivity. If he was still sitting in rainy Newcastle, would he be in the same position as he is now? Perhaps not.
And if you want to be around the sort of people who, when you tell them good news, take the mick out of you, totally fine.
See, I got to say, I do. Personally, I prefer to be amongst people who will just constantly bring me down a peg or two.
Well, maybe that's something that you need to adjust the current.
But why though? I think it's healthy. Otherwise, my ego would run even more riotous than it does.
So again, this is to do with my constitution. I need more people to inflate me because I have imposter syndrome and a little bit of social anxiety, and I'm a little bit introverted, and I need that. I need a little bit more of that, and I've flourished since being alongside that. That being said, maybe I'm just a normal level of ego, but I spent 32 years having the mick taken out of me in the UK, like every other British person does, and this is just starting to compensate to even the scales. I'm not really.
It's true. It's true. For you guys who aren't aware of. Maybe you don't live in the UK. We do have this very sardonic sense of humor here. We do tend to cut each other down a lot. It happens in America as well, actually, but I think in America in general, like he said, there's much more of a celebration of success, which can only be a good thing if you want to be successful, because if you want to be successful in any element of life, you need fucking positivity. And I'm just thinking about this recently. Like I've been cutting out recently just a few negative influences, even down to things like music I listen to and stuff like that for the moment, cutting stuff out, because if you're going to be focused, you need to be super, super positive. You need to have your eyes on the prize, and you don't need people, in your space who are just bringing you down.
Too sure.
We've done a little quick fire wisdom quiz for you to round things off.
Okay.
Just need quick answers. You've got to choose. There's no sitting on the fence here. You're a straight talker. Texas or Stockton-on-Tees?
Texas.
Wow. Really? What a start.
Stockton-on-Tees was famous only for having...
Oh, they're doing the quick round thing. This is quite funny. He talks about Stockton. Okay, here we go.
Sitting on the fence here. You're a straight talker. Texas or Stockton-on-Tees?
Texas.
Wow. Really? What a start.
Stockton-on-Tees was famous only for having the UK's highest teen pregnancy rating, and then it lost that. It doesn't even have that anymore.
Fantastic. What an answer. It's over 9K. This is a little personal, but I took a girl home and the chemistry was perfect, but she had no rhythm in the sack. And she blamed me to all of our friends. Oh no, she knew all of her friends. Jesus. That's a bummer. Saying I didn't hit it right. She was just laying there like a plastic doll. Well, man. Jesus. Well, that's social circle is always a bit of a bummer. That's unfortunate that happened. I mean, look, I think sexual compatibility, like anything else, is sort of, you can't guarantee sexual compatibility. I think we are more compatible with some people than others. It's just a natural thing. I don't know why. It's just something that kind of occurs with some people more than it does with others. And that's just how it is, man. And, what can you do, really? But it's unfortunate that happened. What do you think about semen retention? I don't know, man. It's like I said before, I don't think fapping the whole time is a good way to go, but I don't think there's any real magical kind of reaction to semen retention, to be honest. I mean, I don't really buy into the whole mythology around it.
Psychology or spirituality?
Psychology.
Left wing or right wing?
Ooh, right wing.
That's interesting. I didn't know that he'd say that. That's interesting. He said right wing.
You hesitated.
Yeah, because I think that anyone who takes the entirety of their worldview from a single side is probably an idiot and someone that shouldn't be trusted or listened to. But you gave me a binary choice, so I had to pick.
See, I used to think I was left wing, and then the woke phenomenon began, and I've just veered apparently ever further to the right because I just can't stomach
it. You and Tommy Robinson just chilling out together.
Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson? This will test you.
Oh God, Rogan. I was on his show last week. I can't say.
You're
no.
chucking Peterson under the bus. Wow.
Look, he's coming through to Boston soon. I'll buy him a steak and some salt and some water. It'll be okay.
Cricket or UFC? You used to play cricket. You were a very good cricketer. Cricket or UFC?
Cricket all day.
Good man. Monogamy or playing the field?
Monogamy.
Oh, you're going to say he's pandering now, aren't you?
Beef burger or veggie burger?
It's the easiest one by far. Beef burger all day. That veggie burger can get flamethrowed by one of Elon Musk's things.
Oh, thank God you said that. Love or money?
Love.
Pandering again.
You can say that because you're rich.
Speak for yourself. You're the one that's just pivoted. You're the one that's just pivoted from big time TV to that sweet YouTube AdSense money. That's what we're talking about.
You know what? It's very interesting because I've watched what happens with you and with Joe Rogan and all these guys, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro. There is a whole different world out there. But one of the best things for me, I love interviewing people in a way I can really, hopefully, unlock what they're really like. You can't do that in a restricted 47-minute television format.
Correct.
So I was constantly having to cut off people right when I felt like I was getting to them. Whereas today we've had a really interesting conversation. I've never met you, I've never spoken to you, but I've really enjoyed it. As it's gone on, we've kind of, as you do in interviews, it's a little bit like sparring. You kind of work each other out a bit, and then you start to relax and enjoy it more, right?
Yeah. I spent a little bit of time doing the old school TV thing. The Take Me Out was my first introduction, and then I did Love Island, and in between that I did a decade of commercial male modeling and stuff like that. It feels so contrived and cynical and restrictive and just not fun. And then you get to rock up, and if someone has had a bad beef burger the night before, guess what? We can spend 5 minutes talking about beef burgers, and it just feels so normal.
It's liberating. Yeah.
It is. And I imagine that for you, on the frontier of stepping into the muck and the mire of YouTube podcast world along with the rest of us, it must be nice. I really, really hope that you have a ton of fun. And if and when you come out to Austin next or you're through America, I'd love to bring you on Modern Wisdom. I think that we'd have a great chat.
I think we would. I'd enjoy that. Let's finish off the quiz. Just a couple more. Podcast or book?
Podcast.
Nah, it's got to be a book, man. It's got to be a book.
Mental strength or physical strength?
Physical strength. Mental strength is downstream from it.
See, I think mental first. I think mental strength is the number one issue in the world right now.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Who do you guys agree with? I mean, they're both important, right? I would probably veer towards Piers with his mental strength, just because I think that if you don't have mental strength, you might not have the tenacity to get up and go to the gym in the first place. But let's hear what Chris says.
I think we need to make our young people mentally stronger. They're all gym bunnies.
I don't disagree.
They're all gym bunnies. They're all piling the weights on, but they don't have it up here.
I think that most people are neither. I think that most people have atrophied physically and mentally. And I think that the easiest change that you can do, trying to think your way out of overthinking is like trying to sniff your way out of a cocaine addiction. And you can't really change the mind with the mind. You have to change it with the body first. So going for a walk will do way more for your mood than sitting and thinking about and vacillating about whatever's dealing with you. If I had the choice between a good night's sleep or a hard training session, I would go to the gym, because the difference in my mood before and after the gym is way more than before.
Well, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I think the psychological effects of exercise are huge, and they talked earlier about the SSRIs thing and depression and so on. 100% agree with that. But ultimately, I mean, you need both is the answer. But mental strength, I think, is the first thing. It's that iron mind thing, and then then you can say, right, because I have this iron mind, because I know my business, because I know what I'm about, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do the David Goggins 4,000 pull-ups every morning, because that's a decision that I'm making. But if you're mentally not in the right position, you might not do that, and then you fuck up.
Or and after a night's sleep. So I don't disagree. The two work simpatico together. But for me, if you do not have a physical practice of some kind and you're struggling with mental health, you need to look at the physical side before you look at the mental side. That is the foundation. That's the raw materials of what your mentality is going to grow out of.
Chris Williamson, a fascinating interview. Thank you very much indeed. I know the impact you have on people is real. I know it's expanding. I think you're a force for good. I think there's no ambiguity about that in comparison to people like Andrew Tate. And I think you are doing great work. Keep it up.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Piers.
Take care.
Fabulous. Okay. Well, look, I think that was a really interesting conversation. I hope you got something out of that. I mean, they, like I said, they covered a range of different topics, some of them on the dating side of things, which is what obviously my main subject matter is on here, but also some other stuff that I think is very important tangentially, in terms of like health, in terms of mindset, in terms of emotional resilience, modern culture, the wokeness, so on and so forth. There was so much in that. I know people have differing views on Chris, and, I get it. I see what people are saying. Some of you think that he's maybe not being forthright enough in some of the things that he's saying. I think personally, he is opening up very, very interesting conversations and doing valuable work as a result of that across a range of subjects, okay? As we saw from this, this isn't just about dating. This isn't just about nutrition. This isn't just about nootropics or something. This is across the whole range of things, as well as societal issues also. And obviously all of this stuff in the end is interconnected. So You know, I really like his stuff. I think he's a force for good, like Piers said, and I think it was a really good interview. Really interesting. I kind of wish it had been a little bit longer, really, to be honest. But they got through some decent stuff in there, and I will check out what somebody earlier, the trigonometry thing they were talking about, the black pill thing somebody was talking about earlier, because that sounds pretty interesting as well. I particularly, of course, like Chris's stuff about modern dating and so on. I think he's got some interesting things to say on that. But increasingly, as I said, I mean, like, you know, the world is, yes, dating is an aspect of the world. It is affected by external issues, and it also impacts on external issues as well. So it's very important, but it's not the only component. Of course, there are many other components that we need to consider as well. Anyway, if you've got any more questions, put them into the chat, please. Somebody said chicken and eggs. Marriage causes divorce, chicken and eggs. It's over 9 cases, 50% mental and 50% physical. I mean, look, it's a very hard question to answer. I would, if gun to my head, I would probably say mental. However, the reality is you need to have both. Okay, that's the reality, right? I mean, if you think about like Andrew in the prison cell, you know, he's doing his 500 push-ups a day or whatever it was, right? But if he didn't have the mental strength in the first place, in order to do that, would he have done that physical activity? Right? Arguably not. Well, in fact, oh yeah, chicken and egg. Okay, right, that's what you mean. I see. Sorry, I understand what you mean. Yeah, it's chicken and egg, right? Because yeah, would Andrew in the prison cell have had the mental, you know, fortitude to get up and do 1,000 push-ups if he wasn't mentally in a good position? Having said that, if he wasn't exercising regularly, would he have the mental fortitude to withstand what was happening around him? Okay, so it is chicken and egg, and I don't actually know if there's a definitive answer or not. I think that you need both, and I think you need to be working on both. So this is why, you know, for me personally, right, I try to, and we'll do a video about, you know, the things that a man needs to do on a daily basis, but I think you need to be working on all of these things. So I think you need to be doing some sort of physical training on a daily basis, or at least you know, 5-6 times a week. You need to be doing something mentally demanding, whether that's reading or writing or creating content or whatever it might be. I think that you need to be doing something, you need to be doing some kind of meaningful work, and arguably you need to be doing something spiritual as well. And I know that's a bit woo-woo for this channel, for me, but, you know, getting in touch with some, you know, whether it's doing a bit of meditation or if you're in an organized religion, which I'm not, but you know what I'm saying. I think looking after that side of things as well is very important, and making a shit ton of money as well, of course. That's the main thing. So, okay, marriage causes divorce, as humans are a mental species and physical species. Yeah, I mean, there's no, as you said, chicken and egg, really. I think in the end, I think mental is very important, because that's where it all starts. But, you know, I can see both sides. Anyway, look, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been a great stream as always. We're going to end it here now, and then I will see you guys again tomorrow. We're going to be back talking, I think, about conversation skills. It's going to be a good one tomorrow, so make sure you tune in from 2 p.m. All right, see you later. Bye-bye.